I just noticed that. I filled.
We do.
Okay. We will call the April 10th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee to order, and we'll begin with our roll call.
Frank Williams.
Here.
Mike Forte.
Here.
Bill Miller.
Here.
Jeff Weinkoff.
Here.
Laverne Coleman. Scott Floyd. Terry Mann.
Here.
Gary Keaton.
Here.
Turn you up a little bit. Jerry Groves. Hugh Kennedy. William Ravenbark.
Here.
Ralph Huff. We also have Tommy Brown and Sylvester Ballard as on the meeting, but just in attendance, not needing to vote today.
Okay. So the only voting member online will be Gary Keaton, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just making sure. We'll now do our invocation and pledge of allegiance led by Mayor Terry Mann.
Right. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for another beautiful day. We ask that you bless us as we deliberate transportation issues for our region and help us make the right decisions. We also ask you to bless us as we travel home after this meeting. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Look, the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor.
What's up?
We'll now read the ethics, awareness, and conflict of interest statement that we're required to read aloud at the beginning of each meeting. It should also be displayed on the screen. In accordance with the Committee Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every committee member to avoid conflicts of interest. And does any committee member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the committee today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in the matter involved. Does anyone have a known conflict? And as always, if you see something as we're going through, let us know at that point. Next item is additions and corrections to the agenda, and we do have a couple. After the current item number 9, I would like to add an appointment of one of the community liaisons, assuming number 9 passes, and also a public hearing for what is the current item number 10. So you can see that one's reflected on the screen. Then also a public hearing for the current item number 11. The only one of those not reflected on the screen is that to add the appointment after the community liaison description. So any questions about or any other additions or corrections? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And I'm assuming that's to approve with all the changes. And is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Weinkoff. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do our roll call.
Frank Williams.
Aye.
Mike Forte.
Aye.
Bill Miller.
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff.
Aye.
Terry Mann.
Aye.
Gary Keaton.
Aye.
William Ravenbark.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is the approval of the minutes, which were included in the any changes or discussion on the minutes. Or if not, do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Motion's made by Commissioner Forte. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. I think I heard Mayor Weinkoff first. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do the roll call.
Frank Williams.
Aye.
Mike Forte.
Aye.
Bill Miller.
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff.
Aye.
Terry Mann.
Aye.
Gary Keaton.
Aye.
William Ravenbark.
Aye.
And next item is public comments. Did we have any submitted electronically or otherwise? So, and does anyone online wish to make a public comment? Anyone in the room? I think everybody in the room is on the board or on staff, it looks like. Going once, going twice. Move on to presentations, and the first is NCDOT confidence scope and cost estimates, and Ben Johnson will present that.
Yes, we should. Ben is online. He presented this at our last meeting. And the group requested just a follow-up. And so, Ben, if you've got slides or however you want to approach it, I'll pass it off to you.
I've got slides, so let me try and share them real fast. Maybe. Oh, share. The giant green button on my screen. Let's see. Can y'all see the slide deck?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you for having me back. I know this is the same presentation I gave at the last meeting, so I'll try and abbreviate it a little bit since it's the same information, but hopefully it'll give you a little bit of a refresher and jog your memory in case you have any questions to ask at the end. So for those of you that don't know me or don't remember me, I'm Ben Johnson. I'm the Eastern STIP Region Manager for NCDOT at the Division of Planning and Programming. And this is the confidence scope and cost estimate presentation to kind of explain the new milestone that the department is rolling out for projects in the STIP. So we're rolling this out because we've had a lot of issues with cost over the past few years. Many of you are aware of this. We've had projects that get entered into the STIP with low initial estimates. So as they get further developed through the design process, those estimates tend to jump up and up and up. We've also had issues with inflation as well as market conditions with labor prices and unit prices for materials for construction projects going through the roof. And we've also had estimates not updated very timely. So when we go out to award contracts for letting, those bids we get back from contractors are much higher than we expected, and we have to account for those additional costs. And ultimately, costs in the STIP are a zero-sum game. So any costs that are applied to a project that has increases, they have to come from somewhere else. Oftentimes, that's the delaying of other projects to account for that, or cancellation of projects to free up funds for these projects that have these large increases. And so in the past few STIP cycles, it hasn't been very great. We had to cancel P6 because we weren't able to add any projects in any of our STI categories. In this most recent STIP, the 26 to 35 STIP, we did a little better. We were able to add projects in 4 of our 22 STI categories, but still that's not a very high bar and not where we want to be. So we've made efforts to improve our cost in the STIP. We've started requiring express designs before projects are added to the STIP, just to make sure that those initial costs are as accurate as they possibly can be to limit those cost jumps as they go through the development process. We started requiring cost estimates be updated on a regular schedule. So now there's a minimum of every 2 years that we need a new cost estimate for a project, as well as at certain points in the project development process, such as just before it goes to right-of-way or just before we get the project on the 12-month let list. We also updated our construction estimate methodology. So now our construction estimates use the latest bid average data that we receive from contractors. So we receive or incorporate rather real-world market conditions into our construction cost estimates. And the confidence scope and cost estimate initiative is basically a continuation of these efforts to make sure our costs stay under control in the STIP. So the confidence scope and cost estimate milestone is really the point in time in the project development process when the project manager and division engineer agree that the scope of the project is solidified and shouldn't change substantially moving forward. We're then going to generate a cost estimate based off of this agreed upon confidence scope. And once we have both of those two things in hand, that's when we've met this confidence scope and cost estimate milestone. I will say that we encourage MPOs and RPOs to be a part of this process to agree upon the confidence scope and cost estimate. That is not required from the get-go. So if you decide that you want to be a part of this process and want to opt in, certainly let us know and we'll make sure you're included in that process moving forward. The whole point behind this initiative is to make sure that to make sure that all parties know what project we're actually delivering and what the scope of that is, and we know exactly how much that's going to cost. So everyone is on the same page about what's moving forward for the project. Our future goal is to have every project that's added as a schedule for delivery project in the STIP to have met this confidence scope and cost estimate milestone. Just as a reminder, if that project has that scheduled for delivery status, that means it does not have to recompete for funding in future STIP cycles. So the thought process is if a project is scheduled for delivery in the STIP and it's met this confidence scope and cost estimate milestone, we know exactly what that project is that's going to be delivered. We have a very high degree of confidence in this cost estimate that we have programmed for this programmed for the project in the STIP. And so that should limit the cost jumps that we have moving forward and give us greater stability in the STIP. So hopefully we'll see fewer and smaller cost increases. We'll have fewer project delays since we'll have fewer cost increases. That'll give us more stability in the STIP to let us actually deliver projects on the schedules that are shown initially. And it will allow us to more accurately budget and plan for future projects and future STIP cycles. So every project is different, and there's not a perfect time to document a confidence scope for each project. We've kind of lumped them into three basic categories. For your basic projects, that confidence scope and cost estimate could be based on an express design. Certain projects, that's all they really need, and they're not going to change that much, so that could be good enough to allow us to meet that milestone. For more complex projects, we're thinking it could be based on the design recommendation plan set, or what's roughly 25% plans in our jargon. That's basically when you have your vertical and horizontal alignment set, and you have your basic roadway plans being developed, but before they get to the drainage side of things. And then for your larger projects that have a lot of alternatives that you have to evaluate or require a lot of public involvement, we may hold off on agreeing to that confidence scope and cost estimate until we actually select an alternative for that project. We anticipate that the majority of projects that we evaluate are going to fit into this kind of middle category, so right around this 25% plan milestone. And if you have any locally administered projects that are selected through prioritization, we are going to hold them to this 25% plan mark roughly, just for consistency across the state. So all locally administered projects that are picked up through prioritization are going to be held to the same standard. This is just reiterating the fact that there's a lot of factors that go into the timing of when that confidence scope and cost estimate could be determined. I'm not going to read all of these to you. There are certainly more items that could be included on this slide that we have not included. Just the whole point of this is to let you know that it's going to be very project specific as to when that confidence scope and cost estimate needs to be agreed upon, and that milestone needs to be met. But once we get to the point where we know that confidence scope can be agreed upon, we're going to document it into a form similar to this. We're calling this the project definition document, or PDD, because what's one more acronym that we have to remember. This is going to include a lot of information about the actual project that we're going to deliver. It's going to be very specific and include a lot of details, much more so than is included in the STIP description. Just as a reminder, STIP descriptions are generally vague by design, and that's to allow the project to go through its natural evolution as it goes through the design process without having to adjust the STIP every single time a change is made. So the STIP is very high level as to what the project is. This form is going to get down to the nitty gritty, so we actually know exactly what's being delivered and what has been agreed upon. And once this form has been completed and signed off on, the project scope really shouldn't change substantially moving forward. We're going to allow for minor tweaks and adjustments as you go through the development process, because those are naturally going to occur, and it's unrealistic to narrow down everything 100% at this point. But really, we don't expect anything major to change, and therefore we expect the cost estimates generally to stay around the same level. If there are major changes to the project after this point, that's perfectly fine. We will just have to go back, make a new document, and make sure everyone agrees upon the changes, and then evaluate what the cost impacts based on those changes are. That could result in delays to the project schedule or to other projects, just depending on what we need to do to make sure we stay fiscally constrained in the STIP. So I just want to make everyone aware of that. Again, this parentheses not person changes in the second to last bullet is not very clear. All that says is if a project has gone through the point where it's been submitted, it's been funded, it's been programmed in the STIP, we've gone through the development process, and we've gotten to the point where we're able to document a confidence scope, We are not treating pulling of local support as a valid reason for pulling the project at that point. So if town councils change or local representatives change and no longer support the project for whatever reason, if it's before we've gotten to this point where we've documented the confident scope, then that's certainly a discussion we can have on to whether or not continue with the project. But if we've documented the confident scope and everyone has signed off on it, it's in the STIP, it's moving forward. We're going to continue to deliver the project, and we just want to make everyone aware of that expectation. So that's all that means. Once we've generated that confident scope, we then generate the confident estimate part of this milestone. The project manager is basically going to take that project definition document and then run down right-of-way utility and construction estimates based on what's been agreed upon in that document. That goes through our standard workflow where it goes through a bunch of approvals and ultimately ends up in the division engineer's inbox. When they review that cost estimate, they will now have a checkbox or a button that they can press that basically puts this statement that's circled in red on that cost verification memo that ultimately ends up in my inbox for me to incorporate into the STIP. This lets me know that this is the confident estimate part of that CSCE milestone. And then once we have both that project definition document and this cost verification memo with this special statement on it, we have considered that confident scope and cost estimate milestone to have been met. So where we stand today, obviously we want to make sure all scheduled for delivery projects are moving forward. As of last October, there were about 475 projects that were selected through prioritization that have that scheduled for delivery status. Most of these were committed from past prioritization cycles, P3, P4, and P5, simply because we were able to add a lot more projects in those prioritization cycles than we were in the most recent prioritization cycles of P6 and P7. Of those 475 projects that span the entire state of North Carolina, about 275 we determined had achieved their confident scope based on just a quick review of where that project is in its development process. And that leaves about 200 that have not achieved a confident scope just based after an initial look from us. The expectation that we have, and the reason why we're reaching out to all MPOs, RPOs, and local governments is that by September 30th, 2027, all projects that are scheduled for delivery in the STIP should have achieved this confident scope and cost estimate milestone, or they may be subject to reevaluation in P9. This isn't a hard and fast rule. We certainly can make exceptions based on project specific circumstances, because not every project is different and each one has their unique challenges. But this is our expectation, is that we want to make sure that all projects that are scheduled for delivery in the STIP, we know what that confident scope is. We are generating a confident estimate based on that confident scope, so we know what those costs are going to be, and we can start making sure that our costs are as stable as they possibly can be in the STIP. And if projects don't get to that point by September 30th, 2027, we may force them to go through the next prioritization cycle and be rescored in order to receive funding.
Ben, can I ask you a question before you get off of this slide?
Sure.
Of that 475, just to make sure I'm understanding that, that's the total number of projects selected through prioritization that are scheduled for delivery statewide, correct?
Yes, they span every single county in North Carolina. It is not specific to Cape Fear RPO.
The second question is, do you know what percentage or what breakdown are highway versus other modes, out of curiosity?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can find that number for you. I will say this was based off an initial look that we did probably at the end of October. We just made a list and looked at each project very quickly and saw how far along they were in the development process. And if they were far enough along where we knew that they had gotten to the point where we could achieve that confident scope, then we marked them as good. Of those 200 that have not achieved that confident scope, that was based on an initial look. We've since tasked our project managers with going through and looking at those more closely. So a lot of those probably have met their confident scope. Just by the time that we put this slide deck together, they have not, we couldn't confidently say that, so we didn't want to include them in that 275 number. So it's quite possible that it's more skewed where projects have achieved their confident scope. But I just haven't updated the slide deck with the actual number of projects that have achieved that yet because I haven't had a chance to go back and dig into that. But I can certainly provide that breakdown between highway and non-highway, or a modal breakdown if that's something that you would like to see.
I was just curious, and I guess more for the board to think about in terms of managing the board's expectations. That's less than 5 projects per county statewide with other modes other than highway included in it. So, it's outlines why it's tough to get some of the projects we need done in a timely manner when it's that few per county.
Ben, I've got a question too. So based on that requirement to, or, it's not necessarily a requirement, but expectation to have the confidence scope and cost estimate in order to essentially not be subject to reprioritization, does that mean that most large roadway projects that have alternatives are generally always, not always, but, for a long period of time, they're going to be subject to reprioritization over and over again because it's going to take so long to get to that threshold. Is that right?
Potentially. If projects are already in the STIP as scheduled for delivery, there's probably going to be a little bit more grace with those projects that they haven't met that or gotten to that point by that September 30th, 2027 milestone. We don't really want to kick projects out. That's not necessarily our goal. We just want to make sure that projects are moving forward. For bigger projects that are coming down the pipe in the future, we would certainly probably program those as funded for PE only. So they do have to recompete for funding in future prioritization cycles until they get to this point where we can document that confidence scope, and then we would program them as a schedule for delivery project. And simply, once we get to the point where those big projects, have that confidence scope documented, we should be able to put those on realistic schedules and deliver them a lot sooner than we are now, because we know exactly what we're delivering and what that cost is going to be. So we have greater certainty over, what schedule we can put those on and how much it's going to cost. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay. So last slide. Just looking forward, obviously we're reaching out to all MPOs, RPOs, and local governments of this expectation for the September 30th, 2027 deadline. For projects that are managed by NCDOT, our project managers are reviewing all the projects to make sure they're going to meet this confidence scope and cost estimate milestone, or if they aren't, they're going to work hard to get them to that point. If you have any projects that are selected through prioritization that are locally administered, then that local government agency is going to be responsible for getting those projects to the point where they have a confidence scope documented by September 30th, 2027. If you are a local government agency and you do have a project that is locally administered and is part of that 200 that I mentioned on the last slide, you will be getting a letter, or should have already gotten a letter noting you of the project that is subject to this, just to let you know. So you shouldn't be caught off guard, and you'll know that you have to work to get that project to this point by that September 30th, 2027 marker. Like I said, we want to make sure that all these 200 projects are advancing, and that's basically our goal with this milestone and initiative. And we're going to provide quarterly updates on that confidence scope and cost estimate status to make sure that all projects are moving forward and actually get to this point. So ultimately, nothing has to go through P9 or P10 whenever we decide to implement that new requirement that projects have that confidence scope and cost estimate met before they're programmed as scheduled for delivery projects. So that was a quick refresher. I'll be happy to entertain any other questions you have at this time, or again, if you want to reach out to Sam, if you have questions after the fact, he could certainly reach out to me and I can answer those at that time.
Anyone have any questions? Not, thank you, Ben.
Of course.
We will move on to new business, and the first item is the Cape Fear RPO Community Liaison description. Now, I'll take this one because this is something that, as most of you know, we have county input meetings from time to time to get input from the various municipalities in our counties as we're going through prioritization. And when I was sitting in the last one that Brunswick County had, a light bulb went off that we've got the municipalities in the RPO there, but that there were some very large unincorporated areas that didn't have anyone in the room and are probably some of the most important areas that we deal with in prioritization in our county are Winnebago Town Creek, the Walkmall area. And at the MPO, if they were to do this, it would be Hampstead. And those are places that didn't have anyone in that room. And I started thinking of how can we create some sort of a mechanism to give those communities a way to provide some structured input and have at least one person who lives there who has some idea what we do. So I'm going to run through this description that Sam and I put together. Basically, my initial thought was that we would create a non-voting liaison opportunity for an unincorporated area to have someone attend these meetings, speak at certain points, not be a voting member. And Sam expanded that for the and I think this was wise, that the municipalities that are in the RPO but do not have a voting member could either designate their mayor or someone else to also be theirs. One tweak I do think we need to make to this that I just realized is for the ones that have an alternate, that should automatically be their person on here. So if we can, if there's a motion to approve this, if it could include that those that have an alternate, the alternate is their non-voting person, their liaison. But the description, community liaisons from unincorporated areas will be recommended by one or both county commissioners from their county and will serve at the pleasure of this committee, which means this committee has to approve it. And then, this committee could remove them if they weren't functioning properly or were causing problems. So non-voting municipalities, it'll be an elected official appointed by the council on which they serve. As we just stated, if that council has an alternate, the alternate will be their non-voting liaison and voting if they have that opportunity. And it will be the mayor of any of the others until that jurisdiction tells us somebody differently. They may attend RTAC meetings as well as our county input meetings. So when we have a county input meeting, we would want that person there and called on to speak or answer questions about their community. But obviously they can't be voting members because that would require a bylaw change, which is a much more involved process. So the expectation is that that person will provide thoughtful input on the needs of their communities. We don't want somebody who just comes in and says, I hate every project. We want people who will dig in and pay attention. And also that they invest the time required to develop a basic understanding of our transportation law, and what the process of all these plans are and prioritization. Certainly they're not going to be an expert. I don't think any of us that aren't full-time at this are experts, but just that they'll know enough to be able to participate. And are there any questions about this before we have a motion or comments?
If not, I'll move for approval.
Motion by Commissioner Forte. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rivenbark. Any discussion?
Is that motion subject to that change that Frank recommended?
For the alternate to automatically sit for this. Like Mr. Ballard's an alternate from Northwest. They don't need to appoint another non-voting member to this since he's their alternate.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. And we'll leave it to Sam to tweak that wording and that's it.
Yeah, I'll rewrite it and send it.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll do our roll call vote.
Frank Williams,
Aye.
Mike Forte,
Aye.
Bill Miller,
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff,
Aye.
Terry Mann,
Aye.
Gary Keaton,
Aye.
William Ravenbart.
Aye.
Motion carries. And next item that we added to the agenda is an appointment for one of these, and that's for the Winnebago Town Creek area. And Mr. Forte and I have spoken, and I'm gonna leave it to him to make the motion, but the person who's interested is Winnebago Fire Chief Travis Mercer.
I'll move to appoint Chief Mercer.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, I'll go with Mayor Weinkoff on that one, since he knows the chief. Any discussion? And I'll say that I saw Chief Mercer, he came to our county meeting one day and had read almost this entire agenda packet already. So he's taking the time and he's on the call now. So with no further discussion, we'll do a vote.
Frank Williams,
Aye.
Mike Forte,
Aye.
Bill Miller,
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff,
Aye.
Harry Mann,
Aye.
Gary Keaton,
Aye.
William Ravenbart.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Welcome, Chief.
And Chief, either congratulations or condolences. I'm not sure which, but would you like to say anything?
Thank y'all for including me on this committee. I hope I'll make some good input for the group. and take some recommendations or whatever y'all have, for our area as well. So thank you for letting me attend and be on the committee.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to do it. I know this is probably the most exciting thing on your agenda today.
Yes.
Next item we have is our planning work programs, and we do have to have a public hearing, so I'll turn it over to Sam for any comments before we open the public hearing, if you want to share what we're having a public hearing on.
Sure. So each year, the RPO has to submit its planning work program, which is essentially the RPO's budget. The RPO is given an allocation from NCDOT. That's $153,000. It's been the same for the past 2 or 3 years. The structure is broken down on the screen there in terms of reimbursable amount. 5% local match, 15% state match, and then 80% federal funds. You have this in your packet. This is just a snapshot of the categories that DOT requires us to kind of break our funding down into when we submit quarterly reports. And it can kind of easily be carved up into 5 categories, the first 3 of which have to do with how we spend our time in planning efforts in the RPO. So across the general categories of data collection, transportation planning, very general category, and then various admin things that we have to do. And then the remaining 2 categories, direct costs. So any of our travel, any of our equipment, things like that. And the last being indirect costs, which go into having the RPO housed here at the COG. But this is pretty much the same structure that we've had, kind of same funding split that we've had the past few years. Typically in our June meetings, if we need to make any final amendments before the fiscal year ends, we do that then. But this, and also just for the group to know, DOT, I submit this to NASIA. I submit my quarterly reports to NASIA. NASIA has looked over this draft, given a thumbs up. So we don't have any major kind of flagging concerns at this point. But
Any questions for Sam before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak on the planning work program? Going once, going twice. We'll close the public hearing, and do we have a motion from the board?
Motion approved.
Motion by Mayor Weinkoff to approve. Is there a second? Second by we'll go with Mr. Miller on this. I saw him at the same time. And any discussion on the motion to approve? Saw someone unmuted there for a second. I didn't know if they were going to speak. Going once, going twice, seeing no discussion, we'll do our roll call.
Frank Williams,
Aye.
Mike Forte,
Aye.
Bill Miller,
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff,
Aye.
Harry Mann,
Aye.
Gary Keaton,
Aye.
William Ravenbart.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item is our local input point methodology, which I'll let Sam explain what that is, and then we'll have our public hearing on that.
Okay. This one will be a little longer of an explanation, but I'll try to be brief and thorough all at the same time. So within each round of prioritization, which is when we're submitting projects for funding consideration in the STIP, there's a back half, there's kind of 2 halves of the process. The first half is submitting the actual projects. That's what we did last summer and last fall. And the second half is assigning kind of added weight of local input to projects once they've been scored. And before we can do that, DOT requires that each RPO and NPO submit an approved methodology that kind of dictates or governs how we go about assigning that local input, which in its current state comes in the form of assigning points to projects. So I'm going to kind of walk through how this methodology works, let you know at the front end that DOT has looked over and also given kind of their thumbs up on it. And so all we're needing now is AC approval. But as a refresh on some of the main terms that we'll use in this, because I kind of throw them around and I realize that you might not use these every day. Prioritization, that's just when we assign data and then ultimately a score to the projects that we've submitted. That's what the overall process is. The STIP is the acronym for the State Transportation Improvement Program. That's the 10-year funding document that has all the projects, their funding, their schedules. And programming is the term that DOT uses for assigning the funding and the schedules to those projects. So on the front end of this, the long-range planning, where we take various, plans, whether that's comprehensive transportation plans, so kind of a county-wide long-range plan, more narrow local plans, feasibility studies, that type of thing. How we get from that to the end where projects are programmed in the STIP is this prioritization window. That's a roughly 2-year process. First half of it, we're submitting projects. Second half, we have projects with the data score that then we assign local input points to finish out the score. A timeline of how this process has gone down so far in this prioritization 8.0 cycle, or P8. Back in June of last year, we, in our board meeting, had a discussion on kind of the basics of prioritization. We had one of those county meetings that Commissioner Williams mentioned in July. We had those for each of our 3 counties. And then in August and September, we were reviewing draft lists of projects. And this board approved the lists that we submitted in September. And since then, they've been gathering data, they being the prioritization office, compiling all the data for the projects, putting together the scores. We help with them review that data to make sure that it's as clean as possible. And we're hoping by end of May, possibly beginning of June, to have those data scores. Okay. As a recap of the 3 different funding tiers within prioritization, there is a statewide tier that 40% of the funds, and it's just that, it's a statewide competition. So think big corridors, I-40, US 74, 76, US 17. And the scores for those projects are 100% based on data. There's not any amount of local input points to assign there. So when we get scores at the end of May or beginning of June, that category, that first third of it, will be set. The next tier is the regional impact tier. So this brings in corridors like our major NC routes. So think of, NC 210, NC 211. And at that point, project scores are 70% based on data and 30% on local input. And there are 7 regions across the state. The funding for those regions is proportional based on population. And then the final tier is the division tier. This lines up with our 14 NCDOT divisions, equal share of funding per division, and it's half and half data score to local input. So a way to remember, as the projects and as the funding becomes more locally focused, the weight of the local input goes up in the overall score.
Before you get off of this, because I know we still have some relatively new members on this board and obviously a brand new community liaison line. This is really the essence of the most important thing this board does is prioritization. And it's, none of us except for possibly Sam and Alan are going to be experts on it and DOT staff. We're not experts, but we do need to understand the basics of this. And, and on the local input, one of the things we have to do there, and I think it's challenging, is there may be things we really feel strongly about, but if it's scored so low, it's never going to get funded. Do we want to put our local input points on something just because we like it with knowing that it's never going to get funded? So we have to play a game that sometimes we don't like to play, but it is what it is because the data is what the data is. And then the other thing is the local input is partly what we assign from this board and partly from the division DOT staff. So it's not entirely us, it's also the division DOT, and we do work with them on that. But it's important to understand the basics of how this works. And if you go back to whatever year this STI law was passed, it was passed with the theory and the idea that it would take politics out of transportation and make it data driven. And I don't think the prioritization process is broken. I know I've heard some other local officials say, oh, the STIP's broken, but I'm not sure they can define what the STIP is when they say that. That's my editorial statement on that. And I would say that if they were in the room. It does a great job of prioritizing projects that there is not money to build. So the problem is not with the process, it's just that it's outputting lots of good projects. There's not the resources to fill those projects. So that's my cliff notes of that in layman's terms and my soapbox. And I'll let Sam or Alan or DOT correct anything I may have butchered if they.
I'm not going to correct anything, but something I will add that's an important component of the prioritization process is the coordination that this board has with each other, because sometimes, the most eligible, the most competitive projects are not going to be in an individual member's jurisdiction. And we have historically worked really well together to, for example, fund a project for a municipality that doesn't have a voting member, or a county that's, underrepresented or something like that. We've worked very closely together to make sure that if we're not going to get a project in our area, or not our area, but our, individual members area, then at least somewhere within the region, we're going to have a project funded.
And when, to that point, we've gone to great lengths to try to balance, especially on a highway, roughly this with, if possible, almost equal number of projects in each one of our counties. And it doesn't always come out exactly that way, because sometimes the data's not there, but I think that's an excellent point. And we also have to work with the Wilmington MPO and the Grand Strand GSAS MPO as well, because some of these projects cross those lines. And and I will say that's why it's important for every jurisdiction that has members on this board to have those members at this board and at these meetings. And I know the ones I'm talking to today don't need to hear that because you're here. But I will point out that 100% of the county commissioners in this room are from the same county, and there are 2 other counties that are MIA, and we need them here so that they can share their input. I mean, one of them is here pretty frequently, but the other one is generally MIA, and that's unfortunate. And I'm not saying anything I haven't said to them. Anyway, that's the end of my soapbox, but I know we're getting ready to go into a public hearing on what our methodology is, but does anyone have any questions about what the process is that the methodology will inform? Bill?
Yeah, to your point about the local points, how are they quantified? I don't see a ranking structure, or how that just talks about the flex and how you can move, and how are they quantified? Who and assigns a point value?
I will get to that in just a second. I've got a few more slides. Let me keep going.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, I just wanted, while we were on that, I wanted to get into it, just so people understand what we're looking at.
Sure. This visualization is similar to the last, but breaking up precisely what Commissioner Williams mentioned, in that
Okay, I got ahead.
The local input is split further between the planning organizations and the divisions. So when it says division needs, 50% quantitative score, 50% local input, we don't have full control over the 50%. It becomes half and half with us in the division. And so our methodology kind of adapts to address that and make sure that we are in communication with the divisions, so that where possible, we're assigning points to the same projects to maximize that full kind of 50% potential. Now, how many local input points do we get and why? So the Cape Fear RPO gets 1,300 local input points for both the regional impact and the division needs tiers. So that's 1,300 per tier, 2,600 total.
And that's not per mode, though. It's for across all modes.
Correct. This is across all modes.
I think it's worth noting that the points are assigned at different times for each of those tiers.
That's true, yeah.
Yes. So we will not do these tiers at the same time. We will do the regional impact local input points. We will submit our local input points for those. And then in the months following, we'll do local input points for the division needs tier. And that's because certain projects are only eligible at certain tiers. Some can be eligible at multiple tiers. And I'll walk you through that throughout this process as we have our list of projects and which ones we're considering. The formula that decides how many points we get, everybody being MPOs and RPOs, gets a base of 1,000 points, and then an additional 100 points per 50,000 in population. Our RPO population rounds to about 150,000. So that's where our additional 300 points comes from. Projects may not receive more than 100 points, 100 local input points from us per project. And that's if we have 100% of the project limits in our boundary. So for some of these projects that we share with neighboring planning organizations, if only 45% of that project's geography falls within our planning boundary, we can only assign up to 45 points. We would then coordinate with our planning partners to hope that they would pick up the other 55.
And we have done that.
And traditionally that has always worked out. So in other words, you could think of this as a minimum of 13 projects will get local input points. Probably a few more because we have some high priority projects on the boundaries. So it could be, 14 or 15 projects that we assign points to. But that's some of the math of kind of the structure and the limitations there. Now, in terms of how we decide what to assign, our methodology outlines four main criteria that then I will kind of bake this all into a spreadsheet, and in our subsequent meetings throughout the rest of this calendar year, we'll kind of walk you through the results of those as we get data from DOT that kind of builds an initial ranking. The first of those criteria is simply the quantitative score. As Commissioner Williams said, if it doesn't score well, if the project doesn't get a good raw data score, it's not going to be competitive, kind of full stop there. We can really like it, we can really want it. If it doesn't score well, it won't compete. Okay. The next criteria is division support. This is the main change that I made to the methodology this time around. In that, the way that we used to have it is we would ask the division to rank all of our projects into these 4 categories of high, medium, low, and none, and give like an even split across the 4. To shift some of the weight of that off the division, since they are covering several planning organizations, not only our own, we've switched it to, I will meet with each of our 2 divisions, walk through all the projects, try to get a range, kind of a gauge of the probability that they could assign local input points to a project. Is it a high probability, medium, low, none? And it doesn't have to be an even kind of 4 category split. So it could be, here are 2 projects where there is a strong likelihood, not even a full commitment, but a strong likelihood that you'll put points on it. Here are projects that maybe just simply because of how they scored, there's no chance we will put points on this, not competitive. Also, for our division friends, it's baked into the methodology that it's my interpretation of your ranking, so not putting you on the hook for anything. If I misinterpret, that's on me. Put it in the minutes. I can take that on. But that's how we're going to do it that way. So then it's not like we've had in kind of rounds past where, trying to get the division to split into 4 categories evenly and kind of split those hairs. And this might give us an opportunity to kind of discuss this sooner in the process, because it's all kind of a game of chess that we're playing throughout this local input window. Anyway, all that to say, that's kind of our main change here, is this isn't the division splitting into 4 categories. It's more of gauging kind of like a yes, or we might, if we have the points, we'd like to put it there. So maybe we call that a medium. This project really doesn't score well at all. So there's no chance that we would put points on it. Doesn't make sense.
It sounds like the main difference is that they don't have to use the term high, medium, low, none.
Right.
They just have to tell you what they think, and you
Right.
get to interpret that.
So
Thank you.
hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that was a time-consuming exercise.
Yeah. So trying to save you guys some time on that.
Can I just add really quick? So, the RPO has 1,300 points. The division, we have 2,500 points per regional and division. But that at the division level is split between 6 planning organizations.
Yep.
So we can't marry up our 25 and 15% in the regional and division needs tier with every single project
Right.
that the RPO decides to put their points on, which is why Sam is trying to explain how the division support is changed, because we want to make sure that we're maximizing the points that we do put on the top projects of the RPO to marry up with the maximum points that the RPO is putting on them to get the highest score on those priority projects as a whole.
Yeah. So if that doesn't make any sense to you right now,
It will.
it will as we work through it. And we've structured our meeting calendar for the rest of the year to line up with these windows so that we'll have 2 THC meetings to discuss our regional points, 2 THC meetings to discuss our division points.
And that's why it's kind of hard from the division standpoint to say yes or no, like this is the high priority, this is where the division's gonna put our points, because we're coordinating with 5 other planning organizations trying to prioritize what's the best score of the best project across our whole division and where we want to prioritize our 2,500 points. So we're doing like a juggling act of coordinating amongst 6 different planning organizations in 6 counties. And 6 modes. It's, the rule of 6 here, I guess. And so we're just trying to make sure that we're all collaborative. Every planning organization has a different local input methodology that we have to coordinate with. So there's just a lot of coordination. So until like the end of the public input window, we don't really solidify our division needs points. Until we kind of see where everybody else in each planning organization prioritizes their points. And then we try to marry up the best way we can to get the best scores of our system.
Yeah. So it's like the best board game that no one wants to play. This is basically what this looks like.
And everybody loses.
Everybody loses, but everybody wins because it's about the friends you make along the way.
It's like Great Depression Monopoly.
Oh, that's so sad.
No, everybody doesn't lose, but nobody wins.
Our third criteria is county priority.
What's going on?
And the way that we do this has not changed from past rounds. This will be kind of when we have our kind of county workshops and input meetings in between TAC meetings. This will be the main point of discussion. And the way that this criteria functions is that each county, so commissioners, municipal members, and contained within each county, meet to decide how to divide up the projects within their county based on a high, medium, low, or none ranking. And in this case, we do attempt to have those be 4 evenly distributed categories, simply because you got to draw a line somewhere. And if it made it this far into prioritization, we realize they're all high priorities, but we have to kind of find some type of split. So for example, the way that these conversations will go is I may take the 16, I don't know if it's 16, but for example, 16 projects in Brunswick County, look at their data scores that they got and simply rank them 1 through 16 based on data score and carve them up into those 4 categories, bring it to this workshop and say, are you happy with this split of 4 categories? Maybe not. Maybe there's a project that's in that medium category that for X, Y, and Z reasons, the group decides should be in the high category. So we move it in the high category and have to decide something in the high category drops down. And so that's the type of discussion that we'd be having in those meetings. Just again, as a mechanism to further weed out or kind of have rise to the top, the highest priorities of our priorities. Okay. So that's how this criteria works. And then the final criteria, you can almost think of kind of as bonus points, giving points to projects that have a feasibility study done, have some preliminary design work already done. Maybe they've been in the STIP before. Maybe they have right-of-way acquisition processes already underway, trying to essentially reward projects that are a little bit further along than others. So each of these criteria are designed to total up to 100 points each to make the math as easy as possible. What we then do once we have values for each of these, and we'll do this both in the regional tier and the division tier, is we weight the 4 criteria. Okay, in the regional tier, the quantitative score gets 50% of the weight. This weight goes into then our kind of ranking, our final ranking of projects. So the data score gets 50% weighting, division support and county priority both get a 20% ranking or 20% weighting, and then 10% to this project development score. And we take then whatever that final ranking score is, and we have a list kind of top to bottom of all of our projects eligible for local input points. Okay. We modify this weighting for the division tier. We drop the weighting of the quantitative score to 30%, and we reallocate the rest of that to division support and county priority, much with the same philosophy as the prioritization structure of increasing the weight of local input and local support and local priority in the funding category that is more locally focused. And then once again, the remaining 10% on project development. Okay, so in both of these cases, we then end up with a full ranking of projects eligible for local input points. And then our strategy for determining our final list of projects to get points. And again, we do this for both windows. We do this twice. Is we'll take the top 2 scoring highway projects per county. Okay, this, as we mentioned earlier, is in an effort to cover all across the RPO area, try to not leave anyone out if we can help it. So the top 2 scoring highway projects per county, that's 6 projects total. And then the top 3 scoring non-highway projects, that's RPO wide. So that could be a sidewalk project in Columbus County, a ferry project in Brunswick County, and another, bike lane or sidewalk project in Pender County. It could not be one per county. It'll depend on how these final rankings come out. So that counts for 3 more projects. So now we're up to 9 projects getting points. The remaining available local input points will then just go to whatever is left at the top of the rankings, whatever the remaining highest scoring projects are. And so, and wherever those end up being.
And Sam, if I may, so the thought behind this, I think it's pretty obvious with the 2 highway projects per county. That's to ensure that at least every county gets a shot at getting a highway project.
Correct.
The thought with the non-highway projects is NCDOT has a minimum amount of money they must program to non-highway projects. So we want to make sure that we have at least our highest scoring or most desired non-highway projects getting points so that we have a shot at that, call it a, set aside or whatever.
Yeah. One thing we can do, we did not do this last round, but in our methodology, we can flex up to 500 points from one category, from either regional to division or division to regional. The reason that we might decide to do this is if the projected funding availability is kind of extra high in one of the 2. So maybe there's a slim chance at funding in the regional tier, but there is extra funding availability at the division tier. We might save some local input points for the division tier to boost more projects to compete. So again, it's not something that we have done often, but an option that we have preserved since we don't have those funding availability projections until after we've finished our methodology. But that's how that works.
And that flex policy is at the division level too, so we have that option.
Yeah. And then final point assignments to be approved by this group. We can deviate from that final ranking, right? After going through all those criteria, it kicks out a ranking. And so then I'll bring to you a list of projects per this process. If there is a project that didn't make that final list, that this body feels strongly should, you have authority to do that. We will just need to document it is all. But this methodology is meant to kind of guide and give us a structure to work from. But this board retains authority to override its final ranking if there is a need for that. So.
Is everybody ready to take this PowerPoint and go give the presentation at your board meeting?
Roll the dice, see who gets to go first.
I don't think any of us, myself included, would say yes to that. So if you have any questions, ask them now, or if you think of them later, ask Sam later, especially the newer members. I mean, this is, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask and wish you had, because none of us are experts on this. And, it's convoluted and confusing, but it's what we have to work with. So, and I think you've done an excellent job explaining it.
Frank, you make a good point, though. If you believe that your community would like this presentation or a better understanding of the prioritization process, Sam is happy to make that presentation.
You have been
you don't have.
My wife is happy for me to go make the presentation to someone else. Otherwise, I come on. So I think I hit this point and this point and this point. It's just, I don't. So she's like, yes, if you have another audience that you can go tell them that. That might prevent recapping your meetings when you get home. So, but yes,
The biggest takeaway really for the whole process is transparency and no backroom deals. But the other part is it's really a lot of approach to transportation planning. As elected officials, you are representing your groups to come together on what projects should be chosen for DOT to focus our energy, funding, and scheduling on. And then you have another shot at points when you see how it shakes out across the state to still have local input on which projects are most important to you as a community.
And you get cities and counties working together to identify the regional priorities. And then as a group, coordinating with the department to further coordinate to find, really those top priorities. So it's a very collaborative process.
But it can only be that way if people are at this table and show up. I'll say kudos for Mayor Mann, because he's been the voice of all of Columbus County, even though he's only the mayor part of it. I mean, yeah, that's another division, but he is pretty much the one that shows up here, and he's here consistently. And that's, it's important for people to be here because, as one of mine and Mike's friends from Macon County often said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And
shout out to Mayor Keith too.
Mayor Keith, he's always, he's
out driving around at work and he still is listening.
I think for some reason in my mind, I know he's Columbus. I think up in Bladen. I always think that is Bladen.
He's close.
Yeah. And but Bladen's not even on this board, so I don't know why I think that. It means I haven't had enough coffee. And but it's important, and the county commissioners need to be here to represent those unincorporated areas, and hopefully the liaisons as well. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public have a desire to speak on this? And the item for the public hearing is the methodology that we'll be voting on in a moment. Going once, going twice. Seeing no public comments, we will close the public hearing and I'll accept a motion. Is that a motion to approve, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Forte. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do our roll call.
Frank Williams,
Yes.
Mike Forte,
Aye.
Bill Miller,
Aye.
Jeff Weinkoff, Terry Mann,
All right.
Gary Keaton,
Aye.
William Ravenbart.
Aye.
The methodology is approved. Yes, sir.
Real quick before I move on, I know you'd asked a question. Did some of what I covered address that?
You're correct, some of what you. Let me answer. For me, it was a matter of objectivity versus subjectivity.
Sure.
And I realize there's going to be a level of subjectivity that remains regardless. But I think the objectivity of the rubric is apparent. It's a matter of how we then collectively address the subjectivity of the remaining points.
Okay.
I think I'm good with that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I didn't.
I hope what I said actually makes sense. I'm still kind of processing.
If you figure it out, well, please let us know.
10 years, Frank's here 14, we still get confused with it.
I've been chair of this thing since 2014 and it still gives me a headache.
Well, and that's one of the reasons we write down and adopt a methodology so that it's very clear what we're supposed to do.
It's very clear.
Very good. It's what we're supposed to do.
And we've
Not
structured,
that you don't have to refer to it for it to be clear, right?
yeah, we've structured our schedules and our agendas so that hopefully you get multiple looks at it before having to make any decisions.
But if no other questions on that, we voted, so the motion is approved. We'll move on to reports and updates. The first is Cape Fear RPO.
Okay, a few quick things. In the agenda packet, just a reminder on the meeting schedule, those dates are in there. I don't think we've had this issue with the TAC. We've had some issues on the TCC for anyone who uses an electronic calendar, the invites that I sent out in January, some committee members didn't receive them, and so they weren't showing up on their calendar. So I'd ask that if you do use an electronic calendar, to double check that the meeting invitations that have the dates and the times and the Zoom links that you did get those, and if you didn't, let me know and I'll send it again.
And I'll send you the email address for Travis Mercer, if you can make sure you add him to the future invites. And if anyone does not use an electronic calendar, please let Sam know so he could send it to you in a format. We had 2 years ago, one of our commissioners was getting electronic invites and used a paper calendar and was not showing up at things because he didn't know about them.
Also, anyone who wants a agenda packet mailed, like a physical packet mailed to them in advance of the meetings, let me know. There are a few that do. If you prefer that to the email that gives you a link to access it digitally, if you'd like one physically mailed to you, I can do that. So just let me know.
On the meeting schedule, at what point will we have most likely our next community input meetings in the various counties? I know that's not on this schedule, but
That will likely be in either late June or mid-July.
then what about, will there be any more after that for the second round? Probably, I think
In between our,
September, October is kind of, yeah. So we just wanted to put that on everyone's radar as well.
and so, yeah, I'll be reaching out and we'll try to get those dates. We're kind of waiting until we've confirmed that we have the scores.
Right.
We'll need
Makes
those.
sense.
But once we do, we'll try to get those on the calendar to.
And the scores the next month, right?
Yes. So yes, I'll be in touch about those workshop dates. Another reminder for anyone remaining that hasn't done your ethics filing, I think we're somewhere in the ballpark of 80% of TAC members have. There's just a few outliers.
Can you remind those individuals that have
Well,
not?
Somebody just did mine earlier this week, I think.
Sent some reminders earlier this week. I'll send some again this afternoon. And then probably early next week.
Assuming since you didn't send me anything, that means mine was.
If you haven't heard from me about this in a couple of weeks, you're good. So thank you for those that got them in, and hopefully we'll get the rest in before that deadline next week. You have in your packet a few updates from the STIP, mostly just scheduling changes. And so if you have any questions on those in there, let me know. But I'm not gonna spend enough time there. The last thing I wanted to cover was this kind of bill that's being discussed in House Committee on Transportation. I believe Commissioner Williams, you said that the WMPO board received a presentation.
Yeah, the WMPO board, I believe we adopted a resolution on it. That meeting seems like 3 years ago, but and the National Association of Counties is 100% behind this as well.
Okay. I know that I believe it's the National MPO Association as.
They spoke at their meeting.
Was that who presented? Okay.
And to be clear, this is the United States House.
US
not the
House.
North Carolina.
Right.
House.
Correct, US. So what this would do, just wanted to put this on your radar. It'd be up to this group if you want any type of formal action. But some of the main points of this, Basics Act is building on some of the existing programs that fund bridge repairs and road safety projects, as well as the Surface Transportation Block Grant funds that the state and in some cases MPOs use for funding projects. Relevant to this group, one of the big things that this would do is it would federally designate, in this bill, it calls them RTPOs, Rural Transportation Planning Organizations, which is effectively what we are. They would be federally recognized. Right now, we are state recognized. The state gets funding. It is in North Carolina state law that creates RPOs as we function today. This would federally recognize RPOs, and it proposes a minimum budget of 300,000, which is nearly twice what we currently operate on.
That'd be federal money they would.
That would be federal money, and I believe it says in there it's 100% federal money, which would also be a change from how our funding structure works right now.
We need to find out what strings come attached with that too.
Correct. It is unclear how that would change the way that RPOs operate in North Carolina. How, what responsibilities or things might shift from DOT, like in the Transportation Planning Division. Would this change how we do CTPs? I don't know. I have nothing to go off of. This is pure speculation.
One of the things, I heard some conversation about this at the last national conference I attended for counties, and a lot of states don't have anything in their rural areas. They have their MPOs and then they have waste and nothing happening as far as there's nothing like an RPO. So I think that's probably what's spurring this. We're probably ahead of the game, and we may wind up being one of the models they use for how to do it.
I do know that North Carolina is a bit ahead in terms
Yeah.
of the structure.
Some of the other
of
states
that.
I talked to were like, "Oh, can I learn how y'all do that?" I'm like, "Well, if I figure it out, I'll tell you." We have meetings and we talk about stuff.
I signed something, he puts it in front of me, I don't know. So anyway, I don't know if there's any discussion or any questions.
The outline or bills in your packet if you want to read it.
Correct. If you would like more than just the kind of one page, if you want me to forward you further information, let me know. At the very least, I wanted this to be on your radar for anyone else that you have discussions with. So.
And if we think it's a good idea, then
Mhm.
if you happen to be speaking with Congressman Rouser, you might bring it up.
And he's on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and is a chair of one of the subcommittees. I don't remember which one. So he's certainly a player in this. And I think he may be a sponsor of this. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that.
I don't think it's a sponsor, but it is referred to that committee at this point.
But yeah, the National Association of Counties, I texted them during our last MPO meeting to see, because they were named by this presenter, so I wanted to make sure that that name drop was accurate. So yeah, we are 100% behind this and actually helped write some of it. So that's obviously a lot of other states are different because you have county roads, but still the fact that local government across the country seems to be supportive of this to me is a positive thing. It's a green flag.
Any other questions on this or anything from before it? That's all I had for my staff report.
Any other questions for Sam? If not, we'll move on to the ports.
I don't believe we have anyone from the ports or from Ferry Division today.
Ports Ferry. Division 3 is in the house.
I'm Adrian Cox here representing Division 3, and I do have our deputy division engineer here, Michelle House, to back me up. It's your tough boy. Just wanted to discuss in our package, we do have everything in our package. We have projects in development. I'm just going to highlight the HE, the third one down, HE0016. That is an economic development project. It's International Logistics Park where we've received some economic funds to create a new route for within that logistics park. And then three more down, 52076 is the Winnebago project that you were discussing, Commissioner Forte, where we are collaborating. Brian Harding is listed there as our project manager. He's collaborating with the fire chief on that project, and it's due to be let in about this time next year. So it is in project development, and that collaboration is ongoing. And Michelle and I would like to just double check with you after this meeting on the funding aspects of it. Just make sure we're on the same page.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
And then I'll bring your attention. So these are projects in development. Those are just the two that I'm going to highlight and then move on to projects under construction. Your first two projects. So we provided these updates in March, going into the first TCC meeting. But since then, all these projects have increased in the percentage complete. Basically, just wanted to let you know that 5156, that first bridge, is open. We're just waiting to close that out. So it will be coming off this list. We're just waiting for vegetation to get settled and make sure that everything is on the checklist is taken care of. The other project is Moore Creek. Again, that's actually at 94% complete. We're again waiting for vegetation establishment and just we completed our inter-office checklist for everything, all our expectations with that contractor. So that should also be coming off this list. And then your next one is the 211 project 5021. We are at 67% complete on that. The latest is that I'd like you all to be aware of is that we do anticipate a shift in the lane movement along that project to shift to the westbound lanes, and that we anticipate to happen in the next 2 months or so. It just kind of depends on how the weather and how things are going on there progress. So we do anticipate that shift. Just want to make sure everyone's aware. And we'll see you before then, but just wanted to give you a heads up and get something publicly. And then the last group of projects that we share with you are, and of course, we do have the maps. So if you have any questions in particular about these. And then moving through those, we'll go to our projects that are basically maintenance and resurfacing. So this is the time where the temperature, well, not quite this week, but the temperature does allow us for our resurfacing patching on our roads. So that's what the majority of these projects are. And if you'll go to the next slide, Sam, this is your map of where you can see those projects should be listed. This is our 5-year highway improvement map. So you can get a glimpse of how we spread out the 5-year funding plan for our maintenance, which is separate funding from our STIP, but so it just gives you an idea of what's taking place. These are year-long contracts that are open-ended to let the contractor decide when they want to shift their team to these different roads to approach these. We give them some autonomy on making those decisions, but the contracts are in place for which roads they are going to be repaving and completing some maintenance. This map allows you to click on those roads and see more information as you want. And it's a good reference point for if someone asks you a question and you want to check, or you're always welcome to give us a call and ask us questions. And then the next slide, we're trying to share resources with you to make sure that you're aware as elected officials. I always think personally that anytime you can send someone, especially in transportation, a visual, because we all might be referring to the same road in 3 different ways. So I think visuals are really helpful. This is a resource that's ncdot.gov, so it can tell you about accidents. It'll tell you incidents, if we have night closures, projects that we're working on. You can also toggle all the items to the left, and you can see cameras. And as a great example, the courts reached out to us at DOT to say, was there an accident? Our trucks are trying to figure out if they have to go around to get in to the port. And we pulled up the camera and looked at the intersection and there was nothing happening there. So she was able to go back to her team and say, yeah, they can come down that way, that route to enter the port. So it's a great resource. There are cameras on the bridge, there are cameras all over. So it's a very helpful resource. And then of course, weather related items, and yeah, it's just, I encourage you to take a look at it so you know what's there just for yourself and family and friends and neighbors. And then you'll start to be able to push it out to constituents as well. It's a great resource. And that's all for Division 3.
Any questions for Adrian or Michelle?
And I took note on that last thing that Adrian was talking about, the drivenc.gov map. All the incidents that we input into this are also pushed through iMaps and Google Maps to help with detour routes as incidents occur or road closures occur.
And it happens during storms as well. It's very useful during storm activity.
If no other questions, we'll move on to Division 6. Who do we have?
We got Philip.
Yes, good morning, Philip.
Morning, Phil.
Just providing a little update for Division 6. This is representative of Columbus County. So we'll jump right in. First was a at-grade intersection that we're converting to an interchange on NC 87, an intersection of NC 11. We're a little over 70% complete on that. We're working to complete the final structure and complete some lane shifts in April, May timeframe, and got some curb and gutter that's being installed that will continue through April. We've got an expected completion date here early 27. Next slide. Our next 2 slides here will be along our US 74 corridor, or future I-74, doing some pavement rehab and bridge rehab work. This one we're around 70% complete with estimated completion in the summer of 27. some bridge rehab work. Waterproofing has been complete. Pile jacking is about 50% complete on it, and we're looking to resume some paving in the spring of 26. Next project. Again, the same corridor. Most of that work is occurring in Robinson County. There's a little piece of Columbus. We're about a third of the way done. And we're expecting to have that project complete in the summer of 27. Next. This project's a bridge replacement over Mill Creek on Nils Eddy Road. We're just recently kicked off with that with the closures of the road. They've completed some structure as far as in-bent work, pile driving and whatnot. There's still some items that we're working through, but everything's moving forward on that. Our next project. This is a signal upgrade to include pedestrian signalization in Chadbourne. This contract was combined with several other locations. So even though we're reflecting almost 50% complete on it, no work has technically been completed there as of now, but looking to have that complete soon. So our next slide is this is a roundabout intersection improvement here at the intersection of US 701 Business Madison Street at SR 1916 Lee Street in Franklin. This is in Whiteville. The availability was in mid-March or mid-late March. Right now, no work has technically been paid out on this as far as line items go, but we're estimating that completion there in the fall of 26. So this one will move along pretty quick once it gets started. Next slide. So this is just a list of a lot of what we call our HMIP, our highway maintenance improvement projects. It involved a lot of smaller type projects, resurfacing, milling, surface treatments, some rumble strips, things of that nature. Try to call out those routes in the descriptions, associated information with that. Our next slide. This is a list of upcoming projects involving the HMIP bridge safety projects and the associated information with those. I've got one there, the very top one, or actually the two top ones that were supposed to be let in April. So those should come online by our next meeting, and we'll have a little more information to share at that point. Others are kind of those future projects moving forward over the next couple of years. The bottom three on this are currently in the STIP, and those will be prioritized as part of the P8 cycle, and hopefully get those moved a little closer to completion at some point. But I think that concludes the report. So I'll take any questions. I will note one. I think there was a comment from regarding the US 74 ramps near the Whiteville area. That those ramps have been reviewed, and from what I understand, I think there's maybe some maintenance issues, some maybe rutting, and some shoulders where maybe the trucks were pulling off of the ramps. That will come about as a part of, I believe it's the HI, one of those HI projects, either 0019 or 20. But they will be looking to improve those conditions and add some asphalt paved shoulder area.
Okay, thank you.
Philip, I got two quick questions. I just drove down that corridor last weekend. It looks like you guys are doing some shoulder work on 74. Are you guys widening the shoulders at all, or are you just rehabbing them?
A lot of the projects, the two that we referenced, if it's in those areas, they'll be doing they're rehabbing some of the asphalt structure there. So I don't know if it involves milling, but there's probably going to be some milling at some bridges and tie-ins and things of that nature. And then once they once they bring that up, they'll more than likely would be doing some shoulder reconstruction, as you mentioned. To what extent, I don't know. It probably is on a case by case issue or a basis, if you will, to kind of bring those up to code, if you will. If you've got a particular location, I'll be more than happy to look into those and get something back to you.
I don't have a particular location. I was just, it looked like it was, the shoulders were wider and every time we inch closer to interstate standard shoulders, that's a good thing. My other question was, it seems like I don't know if the projects are quite complete, but it looks like the cones are all up at Lake Waccamaw on 74, at Old Lake Road, and at Chauncey Town Road. Any idea if and when the speed limit would be increased to 70 up to Bolton, past, what is it, 242? Up to that grade intersection at Blackman Road or Blacksmith Road?
I do not have an answer for that one, but I can look into it.
Okay.
Any other questions for Philip?
Go
ahead.
Philip. So Philip, going back to those ramps, you said it would be in the HI 19 or 20, which are scheduled for 2031. There's not going to be any asphalt left there in 2031 on one of those ramps.
And they may be doing some of that as part of a maintenance operation before that the roadway.
Okay.
Those projects come about. I reached out to the district engineer, Aaron, and he's coordinated with the construction unit, and they're looking to address that. I can maybe get a better schedule on when that would happen.
Okay, because the one coming in from Wilmington, the first Whiteville exit, I don't know what it's called, but the first Whiteville exit going west, that ramp, I mean, it is, I mean, it's really terrible. And if they wait to 2031, it'll be a dirt road.
That's not the one, if you're going west, that's not the one where Cox Furniture is, but the one
No,
before
the
that.
first, the one, it's marked the hospital exit, but I think it's technically 701 business maybe.
So.
But anyway, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Transportation planning, Nazia, I believe she's on, isn't she?
Morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Just two quick highlights, CTP highlights. For Columbus County CTP, as you may know, the CTP was adopted toward the end of last year. And recently, our engineers have mailed out the copies of the report to all adopting agencies and the RPO. And the CTP has been fully closed out and is available on our website, on the Connect site. And then for Pender County CTP, we're getting the report ready, hopefully this month, to send to our vendor for production before we start review and go out to the public for public involvement sessions. Everything else I think I touched on at the last meeting, and it's on the packet. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Nazia? Seeing none, do we have anyone from Integrated Mobility Division?
I don't think so, but I just want to update on Kim's behalf. We're in the midst of the application cycle for IMD's annual multimodal planning grant program. That's one that this board has passed several resolutions in the past couple of years. Got Southport and Oak Island working on or kind of wrapping up local plans funded through that effort. Burgall and Surf City are getting started this summer. I was just talking to Tabor City yesterday. We're finishing up an application. So we've had a good batting average with this grant. We're hoping to keep that going. So we submitted with Tabor City within the next week.
Thank you, sir. Board of Transportation, anyone on?
No, sir.
Move on to open discussion. I have a couple of things for the new members. If you look at the very back of your packet, there's a 5-page list of acronyms for transportation. That tells you how many acronyms we have. So if you hear hearing you and you hear somebody say something about a CTP and you're not sure what that means, I'd encourage you to have this handy at every meeting. Maybe we take this out of the packet and have them on the table. The MPO has a legal size, double-sided version that's laminated that they put on the table, because I didn't realize this was in the back of the packet till the end of the meeting. But I'd encourage you, if you're a new member, to look through this, maybe print it out, because it covers a lot of what all this jargon means.
Maybe we should call it the TAD, the Transportation Acronym Description, and then it can have its own acronym.
We need to come up with something a little less catchy and more like depressing.
It's just-
Andrew, why do you come? You get beat up.
Couple of things on the liaisons. I think, given that we've got the next round of input or county meetings probably in July, we need to send a letter out to all those jurisdictions, the municipalities, letting them know that this opportunity is there. And then if we're going to appoint other people in the unincorporated areas, try to do it before then. And if you can send something to the county commissioners in the other counties as well, and just let them know that they have that, and also try to give them a deadline to get any names to you. I think it would be wise for us to do some sort of an orientation for these folks before that. Maybe do it on Zoom or something. We don't know that we'll get them all in one place, but if we're gonna bring them to that meeting, we need to tell them the couple of things I wrote down is how the process works, where we are in the process. So, you are here. This is why we're talking about this. Here's the process. You are here. And then looking ahead to the next round, probably the biggest question a lot of them are going to have is, how can I submit new project ideas, and tell them in advance how to do that, and also what needs to be in a project idea. I had someone on Facebook say, well, y'all need to fix all the roads here. I said, well, if you've got specific projects, please send them to me. Everything. I need something more specific than that. Fix this road from this point to this point because of this. So I think some sort of an orientation, so we're not just bringing them in blind and them not having any idea what we're talking about until after the fact.
I think something else related to that, Frank, that might not be a bad idea is for Sam to look at, because of the place that we are in the prioritization process, look at the projects that are actually competing for points and in the prioritization, in this round of prioritization, and make sure if any of those are going through unincorporated areas or municipalities, to try to highlight getting liaisons from those areas where there are actually going to be projects to discuss.
That's a good point.
Maybe less
Excellent point.
so wasting time for folks where we're assigning points, but there aren't any points in their areas to assign.
The next ones the others would be to get them up to speed before the next round, so they're ahead of the game then. I had an idea while we were sitting here. I read a lot of business books, and I read one a few years ago that talks about how to create an operating system for your business. And I read it, and it sounded good, but I'm like, it's so much stuff. They wrote another book that created a fictitious company and walked them through the process of creating the operating system. And I'm thinking, for explaining this, maybe we need to have a sample fake project that we walk through prioritization. Okay, it was submitted at statewide tier. Here's why it didn't qualify. And just actually create a fake project and use that as our training example. So rather than all these terms, there's something more tangible that people can identify with. And I just wanted to throw that out before I forget it. And one thing
could be a real project too.
Yeah. Here's maybe a couple of real examples, but a fake one, so that here's how you walk it through, and eventually it gets funded at the division tier or whatever. It didn't make it at these two, it cascaded down. Here's why, et cetera, et cetera. Legislature goes back into session in about 2 weeks. We've twice adopted legislative goals resolutions. What would y'all think about organizing a group of us to go up there and meet with our folks and present them all on the same day, and maybe try to get meetings with some of the transportation chairs? I'm not hearing any objections, so I'm going to take no objection as everybody's excited about it. I think it would be good, because it's one thing to send a resolution that their clerk looks at or their LA looks at and it puts in front of them, and they skim over it with 60 other pieces of paper. Mike, what I was just suggesting is maybe an RPO, or maybe we coordinate with the MPO as well, and GSATs, and do a legislative day and go to Raleigh and take some of our legislative goals.
I'd be fine with that.
I know that we and the Wilmington MPO have adopted legislative goals. I do not know if GSATs has or not. Do y'all know by any chance if they have?
I don't think they have.
maybe they can tag along and learn. But I think it would be good because what I was saying is just before you step back in, it's easy to send them a resolution that gets into a stack of 80 other resolutions and things that they may or may not ever put eyes on. But to go up there and talk to them about, hey, why don't you put some funding toward cleaning out your drainage ditches in the CAMA area, things like that, and put some pressure maybe to add evacuation routes into prioritization scoring. I think Helene may actually help with that because they probably would like it out there as well. And things like that. So maybe we'll look at some dates. I'll coordinate. If there's no objection, I'll coordinate with Sam. We'll try to pick a couple of options for us to go up there. And anybody else have anything you want to discuss?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the US 74, the ramp condition. I think we probably looked at the wrong location. I was looking at the one, or I coordinated the one up at the Whiteville interchange at the US 701 bypass. But the way I'm understanding it, y'all are talking about the one at the 74 business, exit 242, or excuse me, 244.
Yeah. It's where all the work is being done now, and they went in there and they paved on that ramp that I'm talking about. They paved a section off to the right where a truck can pull off. But while they were there, they could have paved that ramp and they didn't. But that ramp has got, I mean, it's got potholes in it there at the stop sign. And what's happening now, people, when they get off the ramp, they're using that truck area to get to the stop sign. They're avoiding the actual ramp.
Red Hill Road.
Yeah.
And they may have paved that area because of the maintenance issues that are associated with the truck parking.
Yeah.
And now that becomes the better condition of the roadway. So I hear you saying they're starting to use the newer paved area and not the actual roadway.
And I honestly am not familiar with the ramp on the other side coming from west to east at the same bridge because I don't ever use that one, but I use the one that I'm talking about all the time when I come from Wilmington. And I mean, it's terrible.
Maybe you guys could coordinate offline and actually meet to make sure you're both talking about the same place. Because this is a great example of what I think Adrian mentioned, that we could talk about the same road and be talking about two different points on the same road. Yeah. I think that might be wise just to make absolutely sure we're looking at the same spot.
I'll go out to the division office and talk to them.
But I think you're looking at the right spot, Philip. That's exit 244 westbound.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else anyone wants to discuss? Going once, going twice. Well, I know we have there's another meeting in this room at 11, so we will adjourn at 10:37 and let them have this room. Thank you, guys.
Adrian, you needed me?